of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am joined by the comeback kids, Kevin Graham and Brian Degnan. Welcome back on the Wednesday Bulletin, guys. How are you doing?
Great, mate. How are you?
Brilliant. You must have plenty to talk about because I've not seen you for a couple of weeks, the pair of yous. And before we came on, we were talking about comeback kings. Kevin Graham, what is the finest comeback in living memory?
I don't. If you would ask me this question, prepared me for this question, it's rather than just putting me on the spot 30 seconds ago, I wouldn't have come up with this answer, because this answer's probably like just there in my mind at this precise moment in time. But I'm going to say Liam Gallagher's comeback over the last 4 or 5 years has been fantastic and entirely unexpected.
Oh, well, will we have a Liam Gallagher-esque comeback in Kevin Graham, Brian, do you think?
I think we will. Art Coatestone Roses, I Am the Resurrection. He's back.
Oh,
He's back
yes.
Back to save the day.
You're back. There is plenty to talk about, seeing how you guys haven't really been here to talk about the off-field upheaval at Celtic Park, and also a massive game tomorrow night. I mean, I'm not downplaying it at all. Kevin Graham has, much to my annoyance for several years, reminded me that we are no longer a Champions League team. You've been saying that since the birth, since the genesis of ACSOM, Kevin. And you reckon that this is our level. And if it's our level, we need to compete at this level. Do you think we are equipped to compete in this group? It's a difficult group, Kev.
It's an extremely difficult group. When the draw was getting made, I was watching it in my attic because I was in isolation at that point. And obviously you get Leverkusen first. Then you go, I wouldn't want that group because they're the toughest, one of the top seeds that you can actually get. Then Betis come out as, then Celtic go into that and you're like, oh, right. Then all of a sudden Betis are in my A. And right away you're looking at, you do not want clubs from the top 5 leagues. Look, it's great for the glamour, the glitz and the disco lights to get big names in that there. But you're really looking to finish first or second in the group. And having Betis and Leverkusen there right away puts you as a favourite to actually finish in the top 2. But you're then looking, when that draw came out, I'm having a look at the pot 4 and I'm going, hopefully the Allies for escape to victory are not in pot 4 because we're guaranteed to get them. Or 1970 Brazil are not in pot 4 because it was looking like, to have a cliche, the group of death looked like it was coming out right away. I was glad to get Friday as the pot 4 team, and the 2 games that we've got against Betis and Leverkusen for me are all us preparing for the double header against Friday to finish third in the group. We're still, you look at the AZ game, and I think that showed you the level where we are in Europe at this precise moment in time. To get 2 teams that are expected to go deep in this competition in Betis and Leverkusen has been a bad break for us, really has. And you have a look at the injuries and the pull-outs that we've had over the last 24 hours. Then again, tomorrow night's looking like it was already looking a tough task, but it's looking even tougher now. The get out that we've actually got is if we finish third in this group, we get European football after Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I think for me that is the aim of the group, to get European football after Christmas. And I'm looking to get in the double header against Friday. That's what I'm looking to get back on. Tomorrow night is what tomorrow night's going to be. It's going to be a tough night, even if we had a full team. It was going to be a tough night against a very decent team. But we just need to go there and see what happens. We're still at the infancy here of the Ange Postecoglou reign. And I think games going to Spain, going to Germany, are just coming far too early for this squad. Especially now a squad that's looking thin on numbers.
Well, we will talk about that, Kev, especially when we're looking at the potential lineup and not only the first 11, but I think you start getting a wee bit concerned when you start looking at the subs. I mean, it was bad enough at the weekend. It's going to be even more stretched to get the 9 required subs on the bench for the Europa League game. Kevin makes a point, Brian, and this follows on by comments from Bastian Schweinsteiger, who tweeted out that Celtic Park was one of the most impressive venues that he's played at, and the fans, etc. It's not the first time. I never take that for granted. I love hearing top players speaking fondly about coming to Celtic Park and the experience of that. But you have got to try and weigh that up, in relation to some of the absolute pounding Celtic have taken from the top clubs in recent years. So in relation to what Kev's just said there, he is looking realistically at Celtic being third in this table, in this group. When you look at last season's groups, for example, 10 points would have got you out of every group bar one. Is that just a bridge too far for the Celtic side at this stage of the Postecoglou project or journey?
Possibly. I think the key thing about Europe this season, and I think we spoke about it at the start of the season, is it's almost a bit of a bonus. It's a gauge for us to say, right, how far are we into this? Because I think, I've said this before, I think Kev said it as well, we need to be competing, we need to be going to the likes of Betis and be convinced we can win and play them, at their own game, play the football we want to play. Once we get to that level, domestically we'll take care of ourselves. So I think these games are good. The chances are we'll get beat off Betis, right? Not be negative, but just on paper it looks like it. But it's important we go there and play the Postecoglou way and let the players try and be brave and move forward and go for it. And if you get beat, you get beat. But we need to keep trying that. It's like if you're a boxer and you're sparring with someone, you don't spar with someone that you're better than because it's a waste of your time. You go in there against someone that's really good, you get your face pounded in. Next time you spar with them, you get your face pounded slightly less until the point where you need to move on and spar with someone even better. So that's the sort of mentality we have to have, I think, going into this campaign, is that we need to gauge. So we go against Betis tomorrow. We may not win, but we need to get to that level. That's where we should be at, playing the way we're playing. So I'm really excited by it. I do think it's too quick for us. I've said that. I said my expectations for this season in general are still reasonably low, because I just think it's going to, even you touched on it, Paul. Yeah, the team's playing quite well. We've got a decent starting 11 now with a couple of subs, but that's nowhere near. You need two strong starting 11s to be a really successful team. So I definitely think we're still 2 transfer windows away from having that squad depth. And then by that time, the players that are going to be mainstays under Postecoglou will be well established, we're well used to it. And hopefully then, this time next year, we're talking about we should go there and beat the likes of Betis, go to Germany and go against Leverkusen and not have any worries.
When you're looking at where we are at the moment, Kev, there's a couple of things just taken from what Brian said there that I'm going to ask you. The first thing I'm going to ask is, at what point did you concede or realise that, Celtic weren't at the top table as a European club, Kev? Because, we go through the process of, obviously, Seville is relevant to this fixture tomorrow night, and we reach our 3rd European final in Seville. From that point, we've then had some fantastic runs in Europe. You look at the last 16, qualifications under Gordon Strachan, for example. Heady days. Now, we're now at a stage where we're talking about getting European football beyond Christmas by finishing 3rd in the 2nd tier of European competition. At what point did you come to that realisation, or did you concede that Celtic were no longer at the top table, Kev?
For me, Celtic haven't been a European giant since 1974. We've had a couple of runs every so often. You can have a look at Rapid Vienna 84. I do really believe, and this is probably one for Screamer Celica, that if we would have got through against Rapid, we would have got to the Cup Winners' Cup final that year and played a very, very good Everton side. When you actually see the teams that Rapid played after us, after they put us out, we were just as good. You then go to your next greatest run after that is Seville. It's the first time that we've been in European football after Christmas in 23 years. Then you get Strachan twice in the last 16, Neil Lennon's twice in the last 16s. These are just skirmishes in the whole European landscape since 1974. And when I realised that we were never going to compete, and we didn't want to compete, is when you start getting beat off your Malmos, you start getting beat off your Ferencváros, you get a Champions League route into it, and you get beat with teams that you should, like resource-wise, should be beaten, because the club never had any ambition other than being one step ahead domestically. They never prepared to be a European club. So you're probably talking about 10 years ago when I begun to realise that they just leave European football to chance. They do not prepare to be a European team. And that's when my expectations about European football disappeared. Now, I think we've completed domestic football. We've done 4 trebles in a row. We've done 4 trebles in a row, and now we should be looking to Europe. And I'm looking to Europe, but I just think this season, and I think it's been proved against the 2 quality opposition that we've came up against this season. Midtjylland, we'll beat Midtjylland with first 11 now. That just came far, far too early. But you go to AZ Alkmaar and we get through. I says at the time, I think we've overachieved getting into Europa League this season, just for where we started. But you look at Alkmaar, they played us off the park for periods in both the games, but we had great possession in some of the games as well, especially the last half hour of the second leg. After we stood up to their onslaught, they had one chance in the last half hour. We played that game out, and you're going, right, that is quite decent. Then you go to Ibrox. Now, Rangers will probably get out their Europa League group as well. And they've been to the last 32 in the last 16 in the Europa League in the last 2 seasons. A decent side built for European competition. When you look where we are there, we're not quite there in Europe yet. But I'm having a look at this group. I'm going, Friday gives us a chance to show that we should be beating teams that we should be beating. Teams that have got a lesser resource than us. So that's what I'm looking at. I think Betis and Leverkusen, we can't punch them yet. We could get a lucky punch. Who knows? We don't know that. If we're going to finish first or second in this group, Paul and Brian, I really do think that Leverkusen or Betis have got to have a horrific campaign. They've got to collapse, and we've got to punch far above our weight where we've shown where we are at the moment. At the moment, for me, we've shown we're a fun side. We haven't actually shown that we're a good side yet, but that'll happen over the next months and transfer windows.
You know, when you're looking at some of the clubs, Brian, that Kevin mentions there, and it's not that you're taking it for granted, but if you were to compare resources, for example, there are certain clubs that Celtic should be able to overcome, and we've not been doing that. And that's the biggest disappointment. It was one of the biggest disappointments, I think, during the tenure of Brendan Rodgers, that we were really poor in Europe. That was the one kind of period of the last 10 years of domination or so, where you kind of thought to yourself, we will be able to do something here because of what Brendan Rodgers was building there. And it didn't happen. The best run in recent times, was when we faced and defeated Lazio, for example. And obviously Kevin and I never tire of talking about the home leg when we were at the game with Andrew Innes from Primal Scream. And I'll continue to remind everybody of that, Kevin. So when you're looking at, for example, the Ferencváros games that Kevin refers to, and we've got our Hungarian contributor in Kevin McCluskey, who we hope will be able to give us as much as possible over those two games. Is that all Celtic should expect? Should we, the headline, how should Ange Postecoglou line up to make Celtic history in Spain? It would be historical because we've never, in a competitive game, won on Spanish soil. Now, I was reading a lot of those reports. We've never won in Spain. Obviously, Celtic fans know that we have, but it was in the Stefano testimonial game when we went over and beaten them 1-0 thanks to a Bobby Lennox goal. But competitively, we've never won over there. We've had 3 draws. As Kevin quite rightly says, sometimes you get a lucky punch, or sometimes, your opposition just aren't at it, and we go out and we play to our full potential. Can Celtic get anything, Brian, or is that completely beyond us to even nick a draw over there?
No, I don't think it's beyond us at all. This conversation brings up two sort of points. The first point, I think, is it's that, what makes a big club. Celtic said, we're a huge. I think we're a huge club, we're an institution globally. There's no doubt about that. We've got the history, we've got the romanticism, we've got the world-class stadium, the great support, but we've underachieved in Europe for a long, long time. I think that's due to the Scottish coefficient, where obviously we used to get entry straight into the group stages, which always helped. When that stopped, you really starting to struggle, and I think it was a mixture of the lack of preparation for the board, and the fact that we were playing teams that were halfway through their season, and we were playing them almost as a pre-season. So I think that's hindered us, and what's happened is your expectations naturally lower. We're talking about, let's try and beat Ferencváros and finish third in that group, and on paper, Celtic as a club is the biggest club in that group, but we're nowhere near the biggest team. And resources only matched, and resources only becomes into play when you're prepared. And so I think that I just wrote an article actually, and it was about basically comparing the outgoing CEO and Peter Lawwell with the type of CEO I wanted Don McKay to be, and the differences there. And Peter Lawwell can point to the domestic success, but this business mode they spoke about adopting, this sort of Ajax mode. Ajax never had a problem qualifying. They've never had a problem doing these things because they were prepared and were organised and were committed to an ideal. And that's not something that Celtic have been for a long, long time. So I suppose that the first point in your answer is, I think that, yes, we're a Champions League club, or we should be, but it's going to take us a long time to get back there. In terms of getting a result over there, I think this is why I'm a big advocate of the way Postecoglou wants the team to play, is because we've always got a puncher's chance. We're probably going to concede goals, but I think if you go there and you sit in against Spanish opposition, you're going to concede goals anyway. I think it's just a matter of time. Whereas at least if you go and you attack, you've got a chance there. One of the things that Postecoglou mentioned that I love, and it's something that I think is really important as a life lesson, is he hates the underdog tag that Celtic have. He hates that. He says, because if you consider yourself an underdog, you're almost convincing yourself you've not got any right to win.
Yeah.
You have to be brave enough and say, we're just as good as them. It's 11 versus 11, and we're going to be brave on the ball, and we're going to pass it, and when we're in possession, it doesn't matter what they do. And I love that attitude. Is it naive at times? Possibly. But you know what? If we believe we're good enough to get there, and we keep playing that way and keep trying to get there, eventually we will. But if we're settling it, if in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, you're still having conversations about finishing third in Europa League, then we've failed yet again, and the club has to move forward. Like Kev says, and like I agree with, domestic competition now is how I gauge success in a lot of ways. Of course, the metrics there if you win a trophy is successful, but I think some success in European football over the next few years will show if there's any improvement, and I think there has to be for us to move forward.
Last week it was interesting, Brian. Jim Orr has a certain way of just making things pretty clear. And when we were talking about European aspirations, he basically said, we've just got to do better than we did last time round, right? Now, that's more of an aspiration or a vision than we've been given, Kevin, by Celtic. So as a Celtic season ticket holder for, I've lost count how many years you've been a season ticket holder since what, 1994?
94, aye.
And you don't know, as a Celtic fan who contributes into the biggest income stream that they have in terms of season ticket sales, you don't know what the aspirations of this club is in Europe. But one thing's for sure, going by what yourself and Brian have said today, and Celtic fans largely would agree with, I think, is that regardless of all that, every single time we come round to those qualifiers, we're ill prepared for it. And the biggest frustration, going back to a point you made about Ferencváros, if we were prepared, and what I mean by that is, I don't mean sign another 2 or 3 10 million quid players. Just get the players that we eventually do bring in earlier so that they're actually there to compete in the games that we need to get through. One of the striking examples of that was when we spent 10 million quid and the two guys were on the bench, Kev, and McGregor's playing left back against Cluj, I think it was. They knock us out. We proved later on in the season that we're actually quite comfortably better than Cluj. And that is the biggest frustration as a Celtic fan, Kev, and it must be for someone who's held a season ticket for, as long as you have, and many other people out there will feel the same. We don't actually know what the vision is on a European stage.
No, you don't. And I'm going to pick up something Brian says there as well, that the club says that they're a Champions League club. The only thing that the club is world class at doing is saying that they're a Champions League club. They never do anything to back up that statement, and they just sort of blindly stumble along, hoping like a gambler hoping that he puts £1 in a fruit machine that he's going to hit the jackpot. That's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. And this season was always a write-off just with the whole Eddie Howe thing and bringing Ange Postecoglou in so late. And that's how I reckon that we've overpunched already this season, getting into the Europa League group stage, when the odds were against us coming up against a side like Alkmaar. Yeah. We shouldn't have got through that time.
He's done remarkably, Kevin, to get through that time.
He has done remarkably. This club should be looking to Europe, because if you aim for Europe, the domestic game takes care of itself. I have a look at Rangers, and Steven Gerrard has actually built a side for Europe, and the domestic games took care of itself. There's a strong physical side that's got a shape. They've got a way of playing. Sometimes they'll struggle domestically with that way of playing, but when they go away from home against the likes of the numerous good away results that they've got over the last couple of years, it's because that's what Gerrard's built his team to do. And that's what we should be aiming, and I'm hoping that's where Postecoglou's aiming. It's not just the domestic game that we've got to be successful in. We've got to aim to go deep in Europe every season. And if that happens, then the domestic game takes care of itself. It really does take care of itself. But you're having a look at this, and we're going on about guys like beat on other squad players, beat on Ryan Christie, Edouard. Let's talk about Christie and Edouard. Beat on still at the club. Ryan Christie proved he wasn't good enough to beat Cluj, Ferencváros. We need to improve on Ryan Christie to get through those games. Edouard couldn't do it all himself and had to move. But guys like Ryan Christie, and there's other players in that team who were all building up at this precise moment in time. This is where they're going to get measured. European football is where they're going to get measured. And if they continually fail in Europe, they need replaced with better players, or we need to develop better players. But I'm not going to judge anybody on tomorrow night or the game against Leverkusen or how we end up in this group, because it is just far too early. I just want to see positive shoots in the performance, that we can maybe go there and the 17 players, 18 players believe what Postecoglou is trying to do. Maybe the 18 players won't be there in a year's time, or 18 months' time, or 24 months' time when everything clicks. But as long as the squad are believing what Postecoglou says, then I'm going to be quite happy.
That's an excellent point to lead us into the next part of the discussion, Kev. But before I go into that, I'll refer back to a discussion you and I had on a very early version of the ACSOM Bulletin. I don't even think we called it the ACSOM Bulletin. We spoke about Chris Ayer way back, 2 years ago. And I suggested at that time that we had a £10 million player in Ayer. And you said, I think he could develop into that player. If you're looking at Christie and saying, well, he didn't step up to the mark in Europe, do you think Ayer did? And if not, have we bought in better? I mean, I know it's early to say, but, on paper, do you think we're brought in better?
On paper, it's very difficult to say, because we developed Ayer into the player that got his move to Brentford. And I know some people thought Ayer was a bit disingenuous with his comments when he went down, but I know exactly where he's coming from. We can't slag Ayer for saying that he's moved to improve himself, and praise Liam Scales for actually saying the exact same thing, moving from Shamrock Rovers to Celtic. You can't slag one and no slag the other.
We can't take that personally as a club as well, though, Kev. It's not against Celtic. He's not saying, Brentford's a bigger club than Celtic. I mean, that's not what he's trying to say. It's the platform. that he's playing on.
And you look at last season, it seems that everything was rotten in the dressing room last season. And maybe Ayer always looked like he was given 100%, but there was sometimes you could see he was switched off because the whole club was switched off last season. And it would have been interesting to see him this season, but good luck to him at Brentford. I'm sure he is going to do well. Same with Eddie. Good luck to him at Crystal Palace. It was nice. I must admit, I did comment to my dad after seeing his first goal on Saturday that was the quickest he had run in 18 months to get on there, to burst into that box to score his first goal. Again, that's a wee bit tongue-in-cheek, but it looked that way. It looked like he wanted to get there. But we need to get better players in. These players are part of a group that failed to get us into the Champions League. So we can't shed any tears when they move on, because it's maybe not their fault 100% that we're not getting into the Champions League, but we do need better players. And when these guys move on, that's part and parcel. And we just need to hope that the guys that come in, Vickers and like Starfelt, can play in a unit, because we need to be greater than the sum of our parts in Europe and can play the way Postecoglou wants us to play and to get us to where we want to be in Europe. Which is, for me, I'm not talking about getting to finals. I'm talking about getting to quarterfinals, last 16s, last 8s.
Knockout phase.
Knockout phase. Because I reckon that's where we should be at Europa League level every single season.
You know, you were talking there about Eddie, and sorry to bring this up, Kev, but I don't think I've had the opportunity to ask you, because as you say, you were basically confined to a loft space, like some kind of pariah for a couple of weeks. Edouard, the Stone Roses, is it desecrated for you, mate?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. I still, it was really good. The last game at Celtic Park when he came on and the Green Brigade got I Want to Be Edouard going, and they sung it for a good 10-15 minutes. It'll always be our song. Doesn't matter what the Homestead Boys or whatever the Crystal Palace Ultras do with it. It's always going to be a Celtic song. Same with the Stuart Armstrong song. So no, it's no desecrated for me. I thought it was very good. The Crystal Palace launch video or signing video for Edouard. I mean, it was quite clear that Edouard has never been in a record shop in his life. he was wondering what this black magic was that he was picking up.
I know.
Good luck to the fella. Good luck to him.
Absolutely. Now, Real Betis, we're talking about them, Brian, as if they are out of our league. They have won 1 in 4 league games so far this season, sitting 9th in La Liga, on the back of a 2-1 away win against Granada on Monday, which I still find a bit bizarre. Nabil Fekir could be their star man up top. My Spanish correspondent, i.e. videographer Kelvin, has informed me this morning. And Manuel Pellegrino has already said that Celtic have a slight advantage, so he's playing the mind games. We've only ever drawn 3 games over there, Brian. Let's have a wee look about how we line up, because it's going to be key. I had concerns at the weekend there about the threadbare nature of the squad. Yes, we're in better shape than we were going into the games against Midtjylland, particularly in key areas, but we are still short. So, for example, we're talking about maybe some of the creative players in an offensive sense, but we do only have, unless one of you want to give me an update on Giacomakis, one fit striker. Is that the case? Is, a Yeti, after a 2-goal performance at the weekend, a Yeti is going to start up front. How else do you think Postecoglou will line up, Brian?
I think you're probably looking at, again, I'm slightly unfamiliar with the latest injury updates, so if I put anybody in here that's injured, then just yell at me. But obviously you're going to have Hart and goals. I actually think Ralston will come back in. I think Juranovic will go to left back. My assumption is Taylor won't play. I don't know if that's official or not, but I wouldn't imagine he would after coming off twice with his shoulder. I think
Taylor's going for an operation on his shoulder.
Right, okay, so he's definitely playing. I think Carter Vickers and Starfelt will be the centre-half partnership. Starfelt's got to be a bit more confident, so I don't think you want to drop him at this stage. I think it's unfortunate for Welsh, but it is what it is. I actually think McCarthy should start. I think that we don't have the luxury to play Rogic, Turnbull and McGregor over there. McCarthy just gives you a bit more steel, just in case. I think, actually, I like McGregor slightly forward anyway. I think him and Turnbull will do well. Also, Ayeti up front, and then Jota and Abada. Just the reason I don't know if I'm confident going over there, but the reason I'm not scared going over there is I think that Kev touched on it. The players we've signed, I think, are built for Europe. The way he's want to play is built for the European stage, I think.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that sort of Scottish mentality of, sitting deep, trying to soak up pressure and counter-attack. And guys like Jota, Abada, you can imagine him playing in the Spanish league. I think McGregor's always played differently from a lot of Scottish players. Juranovic, I think, is going to be excellent for us longer term. I think Ralston coming in will be good because I think he gives that steel, because you do need that balance. I think with Carter Vickers, he's an absolute unit at the back. And I mean, I don't think he's the tallest centre back, but he's a strong lad. I think Ralston's a bit physical player.
Yeah.
So when you're in the corner stuff, they're ideal as well. So I think that mixture will be good for us. But that's how I would see us lining up. I do think McCarthy has to come in. I think Soro's too clumsy against the Spaniards. I think they'll run rings around him.
Well, you've brought up a few interesting points, and I think there are some areas of that park that will become discussion points. I'm going to throw them over to yourself, Kevin, and I'll pick up on your point about Soro as well, because we spoke about it yesterday, and there was a lot of people came in on the comments after the event to disagree with some of the comments on Soro. So we'll throw that one out as well. And obviously I'll get as many comments in as possible. So Kevin, I think most people are looking at Hart, Starfelt, Carter Vickers, but there is a question around the fullbacks. Do you bring Ralston back in, switch Juranovic to the left? Do you play Juranovic at right back with Montgomery on the left? How do you play the fullbacks, Kev?
Obviously, the news in the last half hour is McGregor's out and Abada's out. So we have to take that into account. James Forrest is 7 to 10 days away from making any sort of comeback whatsoever, and Greg Taylor needs an operation. So when you have a look at it, that leaves one fit forward in Ayeti, and we're struggling in the centre of midfield. Soro, maybe he's not the natural replacement for Callum McGregor, but it's probably the one that Ange Postecoglou is going to go with. So you've got to say Soro will come in. I reckon I agree with Brian. I think McCarthy will play as well. I think you'll have a midfield three of McCarthy, Soro and David Turnbull. The back line, again, it's going to be the back line that went to Ibrox, apart from Carter Vickers. So it's Hart, Ralston, Carter Vickers, Starfelt and Juranovic at left back. Up front, I think you're going to have Ayeti, Jota, and I think Adam Montgomery is going to get pushed further forward into a sort of left role, and maybe Jota getting put on the right-hand side. Or either that, we're going to get some strange hybrid of Tom Rogic playing on the right on the right-hand side to replace Abada, but I don't think that fits. Whatever we're going to see, there's going to be some form of jigsaw going on, and there's going to be a lot of square pegs and round holes. And even then, you've still got Beaton, who may make an appearance as a defensive midfielder.
He's been missing for the last couple of weeks, Kev. No update on him, I'm guessing, on the injury front.
No, there is. I'm just having a look at the first team squad there, and you've still got guys like you've got Ewan Henderson, Liam Shaw in the midfield to come in, Luke O'Connell. But if you look at the guys who are first team players, you've only got Beaton, Soro, Turnbull, McCarthy, Jota, and Tom Rogic is actually fit as a midfield day. So we are light there. I'm going to actually give credit to Alan Morrison here, and he says that we're very light in the middle of the park, and I think this proves it. I think against better sides, our midfield three were always going to be McGregor, McCarthy and Turnbull, because they've got the legs and the engine and the football ability to keep the ball and go up and down the park. But even then, that doesn't seem to be Turnbull's best side of his game yet. So against better sides, I think our midfield is still light in the type of players that we need. Hopefully McCarthy's up to speed. Hopefully Soro comes up to speed. we're going to need somebody like a Shaw to break through this season, to actually make a contribution because of the lightness we are in that centre midfield until we get to January.
We're now in a situation, it's a real sad indictment of the state of the squad when you get another couple of unexpected injuries, which is going to happen all season. And you really are looking to play someone out of their best position, Kev, because it's not completely out of position. Because when Jota was asked at the press conference, he spoke about playing left, right and centre, but his preferred position was left. That's his natural position. So yes, I could see him flipping over to the right. We're now in a situation where Abada, Forrest and Dembele are all injured. That's all three players who can play on the right-hand side. They're all out. You're looking at the left-back situation.
There had no strikers, there had no forward players on the bench against Ross County.
Yep. Who were you bringing on? Again, you were going to have to switch somebody up top who doesn't play there naturally, and you're just shifting the problem elsewhere. So you've got a weaker player in a different position. And then you start talking about that bench. So there's a couple of questions from what Kev's given us an update there, Brian. You're on version 2.1 of your starting lineup. Now, McCarthy's a player that, I really like. I think, he really is capable. Do you have any concerns about throwing him in for a game like tomorrow night for his first start in a Celtic jersey? It will be only his fourth appearance for Celtic.
No, not at all. I think he's got the experience. He's somebody that knows the club, obviously. He's an experienced player. I don't think he'll be phased coming in. He's also been training with the boys, although he's not featured a lot, so I'm not really concerned. I'll be honest, that was a bit of an injury bombshell there. What was making, while you were chatting, I was thinking, do you think maybe Postecoglou then, instead of switching players into positions, do you think he rejigs maybe the formation and maybe goes 3-5-2, puts Jota up front next to Ajeti as a front two? He could have Juranovic right wing back, Montgomery left wing back, and then a back three, say Welsh, Carter and Starfelt, or even Ralston as part of a back three. He's got the physicality to do it. You may a quick rejig, do something like that, because I don't think his system relies on the formation. I think the system is still press for the front, bring your full-backs in, overload the midfield. So that might not change too much. So it'll be interesting to see if he rejigs the formation and see if that has a result. Because I think we're making the assumption it's going to keep the same formation.
We are, yeah.
And actually, I think for Australia, he played three at the back. And I think over some of his clubs, he's rotated between a 3 and a 4 at the back, depending. I think 3-4-3 was his preferred formation for a while. So you might find he goes to a 3-5-2, and then that might actually benefit us. So it'd be interesting to see, just in terms of players you were talking about. What I think is important that we see this season, and I think we've spoken about before about the type of usually get 1 or 2 youth players coming through a season at max. I think Montgomery, I'd like to see him get as many chances as possible. I think that boy's got something special. I like his attitude, and I've yet to see him and be disappointed. I think he's always impressed me. I think I'd have probably dropped Taylor for him anyway if Taylor hadn't been injured. So I'd like to see him coming through, and I think the boy Shaw I'd like to see. I know technically he's not one of the other youth players, but it's time for guys like that to come in and show what they can do and really impress. And as Kev says, Shaw is something that we don't have in that middle of the park. He's a big lad. He's like 6'4", 6'5", something like that. Big physical player, and maybe dropping a guy like that right in is a surprise isn't the worst thing. And see what they could do, because I think at some point we're going to have to rely on these younger guys. So why not say, do you know what? Let's see what they can do. If they're at Celtic and they're going to be players at Celtic, then they need to play. And if they're not good enough, we'll find out and they can go.
I was just checking the UEFA website there, Paul. Liam Shaw is in the Europa League squad. So's Owen Moffat. So that's another forward option, which will probably be on the bench if he actually does travel.
It shows you just, Kev, how threadbare that is. I'm going to feed that into another discussion point, but before we leave the potential lineup to talk about other matters, Soro was brought up yesterday. And by the way, talking about Shaw, Brian, again, Alan Morrison, there's his second mention of the day, was telling me that he reckons he's in the mould of a Joe Ledley type player. Just for anyone who's not seen a great deal of Shaw, we've seen him in pre-season and that. He's a bit of a Joe Ledley style player. That's what he brings to Celtic. I'm not saying he's as good as, but in terms of the type of player he is. But Soro was brought up yesterday, and I spoke of a player who came into the team, thrown in, as it were, against Lille, performed very, very well, and continued to perform well up until the Scottish Cup final, where he missed that with the food poisoning, Kev. It was a bit stop and start for the rest of the season, and he hasn't really got started yet under Ange Postecoglou. I raised that because I see it as something of a concern, because it's gone from a player who you thought to yourself when he came in, had him and Turnbull been in earlier on in the season, things might have been different on the park. We'll never know. But now he's turned into a bit of a bit part player. And should we be concerned about that, Kev? I mean, you're saying tomorrow night, he might end up being a starter. He might be forced to start the game. Is it a concern for you that his form has faded pretty badly?
It's a concern for me that Callum McGregor's natural replacement in the squad is a massive downgrade. And there is a massive difference between Callum McGregor and Soro. I think there's a running joke that we have, Paul, and we go, when is he going to commit his first free kick? 1 minute, 2 minute, 30 seconds, because he comes on as a sub and he charges into a challenge and gives away free kicks. He seems to be a bit rash. But then again, he hasn't had a lot of game time at Celtic. So it could just be a learning curve for him. The way Postecoglou wants us to play football, for me, Callum McGregor is an integral part of that. And Soro is, if you're asking Soro to do the Callum McGregor job, then it's going to fail. And that's no any slight on Soro whatsoever. I think last season we were maybe desperate for any sort of jolt whatsoever to try and get this team going. And we've maybe overestimated the powers of Soro. And now when you actually see a midfield, we're now going, oh, he's still a bit raw, he's still a bit rough, he's still got this, he can improve here, he can improve that. He's going to need to improve the more night, or either that we're going to get a chasing all about the shop. And that's what he's going to need to do. And it looks like when you look at what Postecoglou's done so far this season, Soro is ahead of Shaw anytime a sub in that midfield area comes. Yeah. So what that says about Liam Shaw, we do not know at this precise moment in time. But as somebody says, Liam Shaw's got a different physicality to Soro. But at the moment, we're pinning our hopes on Soro. We might be pinning our hopes on Soro. We will be pinning our hopes on Soro in other games this season, because we can't expect Callum McGregor to give us another 60-game season.
No, but you're absolutely right here. Feed the Bear comes in. Welcome to the show, Feed the Bear. And every time he comes in, Kevin, I look at that picture of Roy Aitken and I have to remind myself that he's probably only 27 at that stage. And I think, wow, because he looks a lot older than 27, doesn't he? But as a young kid, you watch Roy Aitken and he looks like a man, and you're not quite sure what age is. He's only about 27 in that picture.
That's unbelievable. It's like the pictures you see for the 80s and that, when you look back over family pictures, and there's an uncle who was 30 at the time and he looks about 56.
I know.
And you're like, oof. We're lucky. Us young, fresh-faced looking lads in this room are all lucky.
Young pops, yes. Feed the Bear says, as far as Europe goes, troops, to put it blatantly, I could not give yes, league, most important. I've heard a lot of Celtic fans saying that because of the type of season that we're in, Kev, and we're in transition. We've got a new manager. We're going into a stage of having an interim CEO who was announced yesterday as a director of Celtic Football Club, and Michael Nicholson. So a lot of people have that view. I guess I'm just, I'm stuck in the way of whenever Celtic play, I want them to do as well as possible. If we're entering a competition, then I want us to do well. I don't expect Celtic to win a European competition, but I want us to improve on what we did last season. Now, it wasn't great last season, and I think that regardless of what happens, we're on the right road with Postecoglou. But one of my concerns, and this leads into something that we're going to talk about anyway, because you guys haven't had a chance to talk about Don Mackay's departure from Celtic after 72 days in post. You've got Ange Postecoglou here, who goes into the Midtjylland game and he's forced to play a central defensive partnership whereby you're playing a central midfielder, Kev, at centre-half. And I know we've had that discussion before, but again, we shouldn't have to play an adapted midfielder at centre-half at this stage when we've spoken about it season after season after season. He gets sent off stupidly, and then we're throwing in an 18-year-old to make his debut. So Postecoglou's looking at that situation with utter frustration, I'm guessing, at that point, because this is, you know, one of the biggest income streams for the club, the prestige of playing in the Champions League, and he's entering into that competition with one arm tied behind his back. We were quite unlucky to get knocked out. Let's remember it. We took the lead away at Midtjylland with an 18 and a 21-year-old at centre-half. We take the lead and we get knocked out because of an extra time goal. A few weeks down the line, we're entering into our first group stage game. And again, we've got one fit centre forward, a couple of injuries, Kev. It's not as though we're missing 6 or 7 guys unexpectedly. A couple of injuries, and it's thrown us into disarray again, where we're talking about playing people out of position. The bench might have some of the names you've mentioned, Kev. They've not got the experience that you would expect in a game of this magnitude. You know, as much as I like the look of Owen Moffat, you don't want to be throwing him in, because these games can just gobble a young guy like that up. I mean, I know it can work the other way, but it's not ideal. Ange Postecoglou must be looking at the situation currently, having come into the club, and apparently part of that process, the latter part of that process, was dealt with by the now departed Dominic Mackay. He's come into the club, Brian. He doesn't have his backroom team, and I don't mean coaching staff. You've written about it as well, but a backroom team where we're talking about analysis and sports science, etc., to prepare us for these big games. And the CEO who's came in is no longer there, and he's now looking at a group stage game. And again, he must be feeling like he's doing it with one arm tied behind his back, because he's shuffling the pack time and time again. You can still hear me, but someone obviously keeps switching my camera off. I don't know why, but there we go. And it might come back with the webcam. So there you go. There's a full head-on shot. And I'll continue to talk just while we get that sorted out, just so that I didn't scare the bairns. And Postecoglou, it does concern me, Brian, that we're in a situation where the one thing that's keeping us going at the moment is him, his style of play, the cut of his jib, if you're allowed to say that. That wasn't me doing a Charlie Mulgrew video, by the way. And he might be unhappy. Is that a concern for you around about the CEO situation, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, so again, it brings up a couple of points. I'll answer your first one first. So Postecoglou, it's a huge concern, because the reality is, what we need now more than ever, and we see this when Neil Lennon left, we need consistency. We need to build. So we've got 12 players in this transfer window. We need to bed them in. That 12 players still isn't enough to create a good squad. We still need to get more players in and build this up. We need to be in a position where we've got, our under-12s, our under-16s, our B team, our reserves, whatever, all playing the same system, the same way, so that we can start to funnel players through. The club needs a vision and a purpose. At the moment, we've kind of got that under Postecoglou, right? But he's also not got his background team in. He's not got his sports scientists in. He's not got his conditioning staff in. He's not got a recruitment specialist. He's not got a head scout. Anything he does, any victories he gets, any positive things he achieves with that background is incredible. And the benefit we're taking is we're saying, well, if he can do that, can do what he's done so far, and keep the fans on board with all that going on in the background, the guys, the worry is, as you say, if he goes, that's it. I mean, you're almost doubling up in a rebuild. It's been such a stop-start rebuild anyway, especially Dom Mackay changing. And, I think Postecoglou has been quite cute in some of the things he said. He mentioned Michael Nicholson by name, how much he gets on with him and stuff. So he's not stupid, he understands what's going on. And there was rumours that him and Dom Mackay weren't quite as close as their loving glances at each other suggested. So he may be happier now that he's not there, and there may be plans afoot that we don't know about. But it's a huge concern. I just want to pick up on something that Feed the Bear says about the league being the most important thing. See that attitude that the league's the most important thing every year? That's the attitude that Peter Lawwell and the board have had for the past 9 years. That's why Celtic are constantly worried about Europe. We've got to be more ambitious than that. We have to be. And when we get a CEO in, like the one that Don Mackay promised to be, this modern thinking CEO who's going to just deal with the finances and that side of the business and leave the football to the football people. And that's what we need. We don't need this job for the boys. Let's keep the system going. We've been successful so far. Let's keep doing it the same way. It will be fine, because it won't. There's massive changes needed. I think I'm a wee bit more annoyed, a wee bit more upset with the CEO leaving than most people, because I work in a sort of high corporate structure business, and I see the effect leadership at that level has. And us as a club, it's not just the football side we need to be concerned about, because it's been run so poorly in so many aspects for such a long time. That has to improve. So I'm more concerned at the optics of who's picking new CEO and what that might look like than the team at the moment. But to answer your first point, of course I'm concerned about Postecoglou's happiness. I think he's the thing that's holding everyone together at the moment. But the CEO, I think, is a real sad indictment of where we are structurally at the club at the moment.
I've got a comment, Brian, because we read the comments obviously on all the various channels, don't always have the opportunity to come through and directly respond to them, because the 1 hour show, Kev, as Kev demonstrated with Scream of Celica, could quite easily become a 2 hour show. If you're not careful. And by the way, we'll stay here for 2 hours if everybody's available, but people are juggling all the time. But one of the things that was brought up yesterday following yesterday's show was that we need to stop focusing on the board. So it's going back to a point that's been made here. And let's just look at the board in isolation over the last year. Let's go back 1 year ago. And when we started, Kevin, raising big concerns about Neil Lennon, it was about a year ago, wasn't it? On a Celtic state of mind. Now, if you just look at the performance within that 1 year, and yes, we've had COVID, but so's every other football club in the world, right? So, every time I hear that, I'm thinking, yes, but we're on the same kind of playing kind of level as everybody else in respect to COVID, because everybody's had to deal with that, right? So the Neil Lennon, it wasn't working. They dragged their heels. Some people were saying it wasn't working in September. You look at the Ferencváros game, they dragged their heels until February. So there's a board who, for me, showed themselves up to be incompetent at that stage. We then went 106 days without a man in charge. That's on the board. We then went through that whole process of putting all our eggs in one basket with Eddie Howe. That's on the board. And then we have appointed someone who was going to modernise the football club, Kevin, and he lasts 72 days. As Brian says, we don't know the ins and outs of that, but there's part of the responsibility there is on the board. Either we've actually appointed the wrong guy, or it's gone wrong since he's came in. So the part of that responsibility is on the board. It concerns me greatly, Kev, that, and also you could throw into that mix, once again, we were ill prepared for the Champions League qualifier. So in isolation, just the last year, it has been a comedy of errors by the board, Kev. You've not had an opportunity to speak about the handling of the Dominic Mackay appointment and departure, or the current state of play at Celtic in terms of the boardroom level. What's your take on it, Kev?
Truthfully, when the news came through on Friday night, I was more concerned that Kyago was out for 7 games at that precise moment in time. The fact that my football club showed that we were not a shambles once again didn't actually surprise me. I was too busy bored that our star player was going to be out for 7 games, and I was having a look at the 7 games that he was going to miss and how we were going to do him, how we were going to do without him and that. Look, after a couple of days, and you've seen that, I'm not going to go across the leaks to certain journalists of what is supposed to have happened. What's clearly happened is he's done something to annoy Dermot Desmond, and Dermot Desmond's pulled the trigger and says, go, this is not working for whatever reasons. What Celtic do next will say everything about the direction that the club is going. Mm-hmm. At the moment, they're standing with their foot above a landmine, and they can either put it down on that landmine and everything goes boom, or they can overstep it and move the club forward into modernisation. Maybe Don Mackay wasn't the man to take the club forward. Maybe replacing a micromanager like Peter Law with having the same corporate structure behind them was just too much for people to take. But we need to move forward, and whether that means replacing the chairman, getting a CEO in who has got the ear of the major shareholder, because that's what he needs. He needs the ear. I think it's extremely clear that this football club is run by whatever Dermot Desmond says. So for me, if Dermot Desmond wants to take a hands-on role, appoint his man. Come in and appoint a man who's got the same vision for the football club as him, and then we've got somebody to blame, rather than this sort of smoke and mirrors which is going out the now, and bits and pieces and rumours and counter rumours, knowing full well that Don Mackay can't come out and tell us his side of the story. Where we go from here is more important than what's happened in the last 72 days. It is worrying. It is really worrying. And I didn't trust this PLC board to do anything, as you've just listed a list of crimes over the last 12 months, which shows that they're not fit for purpose. The modernisation still needs to happen, and Dermot Desmond needs to make sure that modernisation happens. If that means him appointing Ross Desmond to take over his inheritance, then so be it. But let's not try to let's not kid us on any longer. Let's start being truthful with us, and let's move on. And this club needs modernised, and it needs to get done. We need to replace Banker. We need to replace quite a lot of the non-executive board who haven't done their job over the last 10 years by calling into question decisions that Peter Wall's made. I mean, we're talking about winning the league. Aye, we won the league fine and well, but what do we do after it? The next season, the league's the priority again. No, I want to win the league and go and do something in Europe. I just didn't want to win the league for the kudos it brings winning the league. And that mindset has to change.
I agree with that.
Mindset has to change.
Should we have seen the writing on the wall when you look at a CEO who's come in with a vision, talking about modernisation of the football club, yet somehow Dermot Desmond had to get hands-on with transfers? I'm not going to name particular transfers, but that was one of the stories that was leaked, Kev. We know that there are preferred journalists out there that if Celtic want to get a story out, it gets leaked into these different platforms. And that's what happened. Dermot Desmond's going to take a hands-on approach to get transfers over the line. At that stage, as a CEO, you must have felt pretty undermined. Even though he's the principal shareholder, you must have felt, well, this is my job. And it's all over the press. I mean, you must have felt pretty undermined if you're Don Mackay at that stage.
Definitely, because you've got Ange Postecoglou coming out and saying, when I write a book, you'll realise how many targets we've actually missed. One thing about Don Mackay, if he had ignored phone calls from Peter Wall, good on him, because that's what should have been done anyway. He should be ignoring the CEO doing that. And with Dermot Desmond as well, he was there 71 days, and this shows the recruitment process was wrong.
Yes.
The recruitment process was 100% wrong if you appoint a man that you've got to get rid of 71 days later.
You got it wrong.
So you've got it wrong. So you have to move on, and you have to see the reasons why you got it wrong. And there'll be people within that organisation that got it wrong, and they've got to be moved on as well.
You know, a big concern I've got, and we'll wrap it up after this one, but it leads on from what Kevin was saying there, Brian, talking about modernising the club. I love the analogy of hovering over a landmine. Your next step is going to be crucial. Whilst this is all happening, whilst it seems as though Celtic are standing still, dare I say, 5 clubs in Scotland don't want to stand still any longer. And you've got Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts, Dundee and Dundee United. Under the radar, perhaps, it certainly made news headlines that they have created a group whereby an alliance whereby they want to review the branding and the structure of the SPFL. They want to maximise every single avenue of the game. And you're looking at, we've spoken about it so many times, you know, we undersell the game in so many ways. It doesn't seem to be improving. So you've got 5 other clubs. Notably, Celtic were not involved in that. It sounds as though, even though we are standing still, even other clubs, I mean, Dundee United, they want change. They want to progress. And they're doing that under incredible constraints when you look at the level of finance they're bringing into their clubs, the amount of season tickets they are able to sell. I mean, I've not actually done a figure, but I'm pretty sure if you put all those 5 clubs together, Celtic probably sell more season tickets than all 5 of them. So the finance and the leverage that Celtic has is vast and colossal compared to that. Yet they're realising that they need to move on. It worries me a wee bit, not that we're not part of that specific alliance, but it worries me that we seem to be standing still and other clubs are progressing, because we've seen it in Europe, Kevin. Clubs have put us out and you're thinking, you're kind of shocked. 2 or 3 years later, they're Champions League group stage veterans. They're there or thereabouts every single year, yet we're regressing. That worries me massively. What did you make of the announcement from this alliance, Brian?
I thought it was good, and I think one of the key things they mentioned was they want to use that revenue to help create better players, better academy, bring younger players through. Dare I say, they've got a modern outlook on things. And I think, when we talk about Don Mackay, you don't know the man personally, but it's what he represented is what we've lost. That modernisation he kept talking about, the fan engagement, the chatting to people. They're the things that we've lost, and it's the things that, as you rightly say, Paul, other clubs seem to be doing, and yet we're not. Just before we go, we've had comments obviously coming through saying that we talk too much about the board. The reason we talk too much about the board is because they're always interfering. Peter Law wasn't want to be a celebrity. It's like a referee, right? See if a referee's having a good game, you never hear them. You don't want to talk about them because it's a good game. You don't hear about CEOs of other clubs or boards of other clubs because they're doing a good job. You don't need to hear about them. Peter Law, you had to hear about because he was constantly getting involved with transfers and annoying the managers. Brendan Rodgers walked away because of him. Peter Law's in the front line hiring Neil Lennon in the showers. They're putting themselves in the spotlight, so we need to talk about them. We need to address them. And it'd be dereliction of duty as fans if we ignore what the board does and said, just shut up and be happy with it. There's also 2 distinct sides to any football club, the footballing structure and the corporate structure. We shouldn't have to know anything about the corporate structure. It should just work on itself. The problem is Celtic has not been fit for purpose, much like the SPFL in terms of their corporate structure for a long time. So change is needed, and I'm glad the clubs are taking it upon themselves to try and sort of get a better deal for themselves because the SPFL board aren't doing it. Or they've not worded it that way, but that's the implication. Yeah. Celtic, they understand that we need to do the same thing, and as I say, we're not obsessed with the board, and we're not obsessed with Don Mackay. We're obsessed with what Don Mackay represented, and we have to talk about the board because they're putting themselves in the spotlight ultimately. I'd love if we didn't need to talk about them. If we never had to mention the game, that'd be ideal. That's what we've been asking for several years.
2 things on that, Brian. I was the same when I started reading fanzines in the 80s. I wanted to read about football and it was all about the board. And it educated me, actually, not the view. I keep saying it. But there's subjective and objective views on this. If you're going to be completely objective, we've probably spoken about the board for 10 minutes of a 60-minute broadcast, 62-minute broadcast. We spent 40, 45 minutes talking about tomorrow night's game. So it's all right throwing the comment in, but it's got to carry a bit of weight. We're not going to ignore what's happening off the park, but I don't think it's been focused on to the degree that some might be suggesting there. That, you might not want to hear about the board, and that's fine, but we've not spoken about them throughout the entire show because that's just inherently wrong. What I want to get before we get finished, Kev, Brian, is a wee prediction for tomorrow night. You knew it was coming. Kevin Graham.
I'll always say predictions are for fools. The best I'm hoping for is a tight defeat, a 1-0 defeat. Great performance, and we can take positives for it. Brian,
make a prediction for tomorrow night.
Now that the away goal rule's been scrapped, I think we're going to score a couple, but I think we can see a couple, so I'm going to go 2 each.
My prediction is Celtic will score first. That's my prediction. Now, thanks everybody. I never said a score, just a prediction. Thanks everybody for getting involved. You're watching us on many different platforms out there, and we do appreciate it. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe because we're giving away prizes every single month to our subscribers. Previous subscribers, current subscribers, and new. And this month we're giving away 4 different ACSOM concept jerseys. A couple of platinum discs have already been given away. There is loads of framed Celtic memorabilia, be that jerseys, prints, etc., that will be given away as we move ahead. And any other smart stuff that comes into the studio, a chopper came in the other day, Kevin, and instead of giving it away, I made you ride it and we filmed you doing it. So that's for a future video. Watch this space. I've got to thank the returning Kevin Graham and Brian Degnan also for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you.